Hey class, so this is a quick tutorial on using After Effects. Um, Before I begin, I just want to show you that here on my desktop I have two things. I have the audio track that I'm going to use, it's an MP3 file of a song, and then I have my video that I exported from Lumion. So this video will only kind of be helpful if you have already exported your video from Lumion. I exported mine at 1080p, 30 frames per second, um, in like high quality. Those are going to be the settings that I'm going to input into After Effects because it does make a difference how you output all your video file from Lumion. So something to keep in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up After Effects and get started. So, while it's loading, After Effects is one of the like two main Adobe products that is used for video editing. Premiere is kind of the standard one, uh, but the interface is kind of weird. But it's better more for like longer, video blogs, or like actual movies. After Effects is more for like kind of little some of these like smaller videos and primarily used for motion graphics. So the interface is fairly simple. You'll see that down here we're gonna have our timeline. Basically, the timeline is what you would consider the layers. Um, so we would see the actual layer composition, layer stacking over in this little kind of window. And then over here is the amount of time that each of those things take up. Over on the right, you have the kind of traditional layers uh, formatting, like your character formatting, paragraph, a line. You'll see a few more as we get started in actually editing our video. Over here in the middle is the actual preview window. Um, and this is where we're actually going to see the results that we do here in the timeline. And then here on the left is the project panel where we see all of the components that we are adding into each composition. So when I say composition, I'm talking about uh, the actual video. So you could think of composition as the equivalent of Canvas in Photoshop, um, or a document in Illustrator. Um, it's basically just the window, the extent of the video that we'll see here. So to begin, I'm going to start dragging some of these files that I want to use here in this little preset. So I'm going to locate my files. I saved it all to the desktop. I'm just going to drag both of these. One of these is an MP3 file, the other is an MP4 video file. So I'm just going to drag them in like that. Okay, so they're not in the actual timeline yet, but they're going to be once I drag them down into the timeline. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new composition. So I'm going to go to composition, new composition. This is where I can go ahead and preset everything like the size of my video. So there's already a default for HDTV, 1080, and then 30 frames per second. It's actually like 29.97, but it's 30 frames per second. So trust me on that. So make sure if you export as 1080p, which you should, and 30 frames per second, which you also should, you have this preset selected. Then we are going to go ahead and find the duration or specify our duration. So right now it's set to 30 seconds. I'm going to change it to 1 minute, like so. And then I'm just going to click OK. All right, so now we have our composition all ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and drag in the video file from Lumion. So all I'm doing is I'm just taking it from this project panel and dragging it into the timeline, like so. So you'll see this this slider bar. It's basically indicating the total amount of time that my video takes up. So you'll see from this point, this like blue little marker, all the way to this point is the total duration of my timeline. And I can zoom in and out with uh, this little slider down here. It's like these two little mountains, a small mountain and a big mountain, or you can just click on whichever one to kind of zoom extents. And then I can just move whatever I placed into the timeline. Since it was shorter than 1 minute, you can see I have like a little bit of space on either side. If I want to snap the beginning all the way to the front part of the timeline, I can hold down Shift, and as I'm dragging it, it kind of snaps to basically like important time frame points. So it'll do it like every 5 seconds or every 10 seconds. In this case, we wanted it right at 0 seconds. So just holding Shift. Okay, so then I can start kind of scrubbing through my video, and you'll see it's the video that I exported from Lumion. And when I click on it, you'll see that the extents of the window go all the way to the extents of the composition that I had already preset. Let's suppose that you had brought in a 720p video into a 1080p composition. Your video might look something like this. So before like proceeding, you should just export as 1080p again. But if for some reason you are out of time and you can't do that, all you have to do to kind of match the size of the window, you just click on the video in the composition, right click, go to transform, and then go to fit to comp. And it'll just automatically scale up to the extents of the composition. But still, you should just export and make sure that they're both the same. Okay, so I also want to go ahead and bring in my audio. So this is just a song from Grimes. And I'm just going to drag that into my timeline just to see kind of where we're at. So you'll see the video file was kind of blue, audio is kind of green down here. And I can do the same thing, just holding down Shift if I want the song to start right at the beginning. So now all I'm going to do is just kind of preview what I have. So my computer doesn't have like the memory or the cache to be able to preview video and audio properly, but all you're going to need to do to preview everything together is just click on this little button, and you'll see this green bar start to grow. I went ahead and did like a first little pass just to see how my computer can handle it. It's not going to handle it very nicely, but it'll be different for the computers at school. So basically, once this green bar just kind of loads all the way, it should start kind of playing in normal time. Right now, it's going like 17 frames per second, so that's like almost half of the time, half the speed that it should be going at. So don't worry about it being so choppy in this preview window. But yeah, the video is playing kind of normally. Let's see what happens when I hit stop here. Yeah, so now it's kind of playing in real time. But unfortunately, my audio is kind of not playing, even though I know it's there. It's just the preview can't handle playing audio and video at the same time. It might like cut in and out. Well, that's okay. But so right now, what I want to do now is just add some text. So I'm going to click on this little text bar or text button, or you can hit Control T. And I'm just going to drag a window to create some text. And I'm going to call my project uh, Barcelona. Two point oh. I'm gonna drag my window out a bit so you guys can see that. Okay, so when I go back to the selection tool, you'll see that right now my little uh, anchor point is not in the center. So anchor points are actually very important in After Effects, because let's say if I wanted to scale this this up, um, like kind of do like a start from this sort of big text and then kind of like maybe vanish off into a smaller scale. All that is going to go about this anchor point. So to move the anchor point, I'm going to click on this little button up here. It's called Pan Behind Anchor Point, or you can type in the letter Y as well. And then you can just kind of move it just slightly into the center. So it's like about like right there. And then go back to the selection tool. So right now, you'll see I just have like this black screen, and I'm getting this error down here: refresh disabled, release caps lock to refresh view. All that means is you probably have the caps lock on right now, as I just did in typing the text. So as soon as I hit caps lock, then it goes back to normal. Okay, so let's say I actually wanted to start my clip or my text a little bit before the clip began, but I want the music to start at the very beginning. So I'm going to locate my little uh, Lumion clip, and I'm just going to move that whole clip over maybe about like 3 seconds or so to about right here. So that way I only begin with text and then and some audio, and then it'll just kind of cut the into the Lumion file like so. So now I'm going to start messing with kind of fading this into the composition, um, and maybe playing with the scale a little bit, kind of doing some very basic motion graphics. So all I need to do to start off is I'm going to put this in the center. Right now it's kind of a little bit off to the left. So to do that, I'm just going to click on whatever object I want to edit, go to Window, and then click on Align. And then you'll see, just like in Illustrator and Photoshop, you get the Align button. So I'm just going to click on my horizontal center alignment and my vertical center alignment. Now nice and centered. So I'm going to click on my text here in the timeline and see next to the little color for the text, I'm going to bring that little drop down menu, and I'm going to click on the transform drop down. Now you'll see there's all these settings for transforming, and there's little keyframes here. So the keyframes are what's going to help us change the scale and the opacity along the timeline. So just like we did in Lumion, we're going to basically keyframe starting points and ending points. So right now, let's say I don't want my, let's say I want to have the position and the scale and the opacity kind of in the same, like kind of like at full 100%, like I do here. So I'm going to keyframe all of those at the beginning. I'm going to keyframe position, scale, and opacity. And then as soon as the video kind of starts, and I can hold shift as I'm dragging this little scrubber to be able to snap right at the beginning, I'm gonna then change the opacity down to like, I'm just gonna change it all to 0, so that here in the beginning of my composition it's keyframed at 100%, and then here at the end of the how long I want the text to appear, it's at 0%. So it's essentially just fading out right at the moment that the Lumion video begins. I'm also going to change the scale so that it is maybe twice as small. And all I need to do is just hold shift and drag this down. And since I already had scale keyframed, it created another keyframe down here in my timeline. So now I get this kind of like shrinking, fading effect. And position, I guess I thought that it was going to be in a different position over here, but turns out I didn't really need to mess so much with the position. Position is just if it's like placed in a different location in your title and you just want to make sure that it stays centered. Okay, so I got my text kind of the way I want it to be. And as you can see, as I'm scrubbing through this timeline, I see the text box kind of on top. So I don't really want to see that little window. So all I'm going to do is just go to the end of my timeline and just shrink the text object all the way kind of to where I ended it over here. Yeah. So now the text frame goes away as soon as the video kind of begins. Okay, so now I can collapse this this text title frame because I don't need to really mess with the transform keyframes anymore. And I'm gonna go ahead and create like an ending. Like an ending title. So I'm going to, just like I did before, maybe I'll go all the way to like the last frame. And I'm going to create like a little text box down here. I'm going to make the text like 36, and I'm just going to write my name. basically all the info uh, that you would put in like a little credits. Okay, something like that. And I want this to appear right at the moment that my video kind of ends, but I want the track to kind of just keep playing in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink the duration of that text that I just inserted all the way to essentially begin right where the video ends. So right down here. And then as soon as the video ends, it'll just kind of like appear. Like so. Maybe I can just fade it in so that it's not so harsh. So I'm going to just repeat the same process that we had done before. Um, Keyframe the opacity, maybe this time to start at 0. And then just so it goes quicker, I'm going to keyframe it to where it goes to 100% like very quickly. Like so. And then that's pretty much it. Then I just have the audio kind of running underneath for like 3 seconds. And that's pretty much my whole video. I don't need to really edit it much more. Okay, so I could preview this, but I don't think my computer is going to like that. But I can just kind of scrub through to kind of see the results. Um, so maybe if I just want to preview this like last little bit, just to see how it kind of goes from the video to the credits, I can just kind of scrub on there and then click on the little preview button. And it should just kind of load up that one little bit in the actual film itself. Yeah, and then see it kind of just fades to the credits, and then it just starts looping from the very beginning. Okay, so I think it's gonna look pretty good. Now I'm gonna just pause that. Oh, my audio just played for a quick second. Let's say that I wanted to, for some reason, split up my video. So to do that, I can just click on the video that I already have in my timeline. Let's say I wanted to cut it right at this point where it kind of transitions to the third part of the film, which kind of begins like right about like here. All I have to do is I'm going to basically cut the film right at that point. Um, I can hold shift. So right now I have no more video at that point, just because I essentially stopped all the video, but I still have audio running at the bottom. And I can just click on the video itself and hit Control D, and that duplicates the video. So now I can just scrub to that point where I just cut it, and I can just drag this all the way to the end. And I can also cut this all the way to where it left off. So essentially I'm essentially playing the same clip, but I'm just splitting it on the timeline. You want to make sure that if you do that though, that these two lines here, they line up. That way you know that you're dealing with the same moment in time on that video clip. If you had this video kind of out to here, Then when it starts playing this video over here, it's not gonna quite line up. It'll start playing something else that you had beforehand in the video, because right now our timelines are kind of not in sync anymore. So I'm gonna just leave it at that place. Okay, I have my um, I have my uh, whole entire thing kind of split. Let's say I wanted to like the reason for doing that is only if I wanted to kind of split up, or maybe if I want to change the amount of time. If I wanted to like add like 10 seconds to my video, and I wanted to stretch out this last clip that I made where the pieces all kind of start falling into place, I can just right click on that piece of the timeline, go to time, and then time stretch. And time stretch allows you to stretch by a certain factor. So right now it has a duration of like 10 seconds. So I'm just going to maybe stretch it to like 200%. So the new duration is now 20 seconds. Okay, so now in doing that, it went past my composition. Uh, so all I have to do now is just edit the composition so that it matches that extra 20 seconds that I stretched out this this little clip. And the stretching is just to kind of slow down a certain clip. Um, it might not look like super clean. Ideally, if you brought in like something that was at 60 frames per second and then you stretch it by two, then it'll go down to 30 frames per second. But anyway, that's just like technical film stuff. So I'm just going to add some 20 seconds to my composition so that it kind of matches what I had just done. So I just went to composition settings, and then I'm just going to add 20 seconds, like so. So now if I zoom all the way to the end, actually I want to add a little bit more. Maybe 25 seconds. Actually, that might be too much. So I'm going to go back. I'm just going to add like 2 seconds. So I'll change this to 22. Okay, and then I can just click on my that ending credits text. Oops. And just make sure that it kind of lasts the duration of that extra space. Maybe I want it to kind of fade out as well. So I'm gonna just go back in my keyframes on the timeline. And right now I kind of had it to where it quickly keyframes at the very beginning to kind of fade in that text. So I'm just gonna click on this where I had it at the where I had it fade. So right now I have it to where it quickly fades in here at the beginning, just so it's not so abrupt. And now I'm just going to have it keyframe right here. So all I have to do is just kind of like mess with the opacity just a little bit, like so. Don't click on the little keyframe symbol because that'll delete both of these little um, keyframes that we already had, and then I'm just going to have it fade out to black once it gets to like this point. So I can just change that to 0%. Okay, so now I have a piece of video that I had stretched out a little bit, and I copied and cut it out from the original video. I have this like ending credits that is going to fade in very quickly and fade out at the very end of the video. Okay, so now I want to export everything to Adobe Media Encoder to be able to create the actual video. Because as you can see, I just have like all these separate layers, and now they need to just consolidate into one single film. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and select everything. It doesn't matter where my scrubber is on the timeline because all the information is kind of embedded in these little layers over here on the left. So all I did was I just, in the sort of empty space here, I just dragged the window on top of everything that is visible. And I'm going to go to File, Export, and then typically I used to do it where it's Add to Render Queue, but there are some issues in the computers at school in outputting. So I'm going to click on Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. It should be the first thing that you see in the export submenu. So once you click that, then Adobe Media Encoder will automatically open up. Just give it a second to kind of load. If it's the first time using Adobe Media Encoder, you might not see all these presets here, but they'll load. It just takes a little bit, like, 10 seconds to kind of load. Um, and it might be collapsed like this. So the only thing to make sure right now, I have everything kind of preset the way that I want it to be. But to get to this preset, all I did was, geez, sorry. All I did was under broadcast, click on H.264, bring that submenu down, and then just locate the one that meets the same specifications that you put into your composition. So in my case, it was 1080p at 30 frames per second, or 29.97 to be super exact. And all you're going to do is just click and drag on top of your whatever is in this menu on the left. I don't need to do that because I already have it all set here. Because I had done it previously in like a test, and then the only other thing, once this says HD 1080p 29.2.97, click on this link asking you to where you want to save your final output file. So in my case, I just saved to my desktop, and I'm gonna call this final comp. Obviously, you should rename yours according. Actually, I'll just do it according to the right nomenclature. So the R underscore TD. Sorry, wrong way around. Other way around. Final. Okay. and I just hit save. Okay, so I have everything kind of set to go. I have the composition that I just exported from After Effects. I have all the preset good to go. If this preset, like, you'll see our final output. Oh my gosh, go away. You'll see if the file type or if the final file is like too big, then just play with these other presets. Like, there's some smaller ones for like mobile devices. Um, I the only thing I care about is that it saves in an MP4. So maybe if I want to do this, like, this preset, the 1080p, as long as like everything is kind of still the same, but you see that if you like scroll over some of the presets, like obviously the one that I chose originally is much like higher quality. But if you want like a smaller file type, just mess around with these presets to get the right file size or compress it down to the desired size. I mean, I think as long as you don't go above like, I don't know, 200 something megs, then you should be good. Ideally, it's, smaller. Ideally, it's smaller. Um, so actually, I'm just gonna try this Android tablet 1080p at 30 frames per second just to see what that gets me. Okay. Um, and then once you have it all set, then just click on this little green play button. All right, so thanks to a little bit of movie magic, I just cut out all the, rendering time. Um, so yeah, it turns out the Android tablet is actually pretty good because it produces a small file type. So all we have to do to preview it is just find where we located it, and as you can see, um, my video is only 47 megabytes, so it's pretty good, really small. Um, so let's go ahead and do a little preview of what we made. Okay, so I probably could have cut that ending credits a little bit by like 5 or 10 seconds. It was a little drawn out, but other than that, my video looks pretty all right. Obviously, I only did it in like one single pass, and I didn't kind of do any tests in real time. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Then you can just close out of your Adobe Media Encoder, save the After Effects file if you want to edit it in future. Remember, After Effects files are going to be like PSD files. They're not like actual video files. They're just the files that contain all the layers and all the data and metadata to be able to edit your videos in the future. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So happy editing.